Hello everyone. This video is going to be covering a recent add-in I've been working on that is a adjustable table that extends Fusion's table command input to have other features that I feel are really necessary. Typically, the default way Fusion handles tables can be shown with the loft feature, if I can find it. There we go, that one. And so let's just take a couple profiles, doesn't matter if it can compute. And you can see here that it displays a table. Now the only options that they provide are an add profile and a remove row, essentially. And that's the plus and X buttons. Now, typically, a lot of tables have the option to change the ordering of certain rows. In this case, Fusion doesn't provide that, but they did a workaround where they have this button for each of these profiles that in itself is a drop-down containing a list of all the profiles and a radio button. It's a radio drop-down list, essentially. The default is the whichever command you select. So that one's profile 1, profile 2. And so you can choose another one and it's going to swap their positions. And while that works and is a nice workaround, it's not fluid, it's not conducive to just the shape of a table in general. So the goal really was to take what they provide and extend it into my own command input definition that can be used. I ended up creating a class, and we can pull up a quick script that I have in my add-ins for some reason that demonstrates a simple case of the class that I created. So here we go. We're going to run it. And first thing that's really important to know is that each cell essentially can be different. So here you see we start off with a drop-down list, two drop-down lists, and then you have two text inputs. And the next row after it is sort of the opposite, where instead of having two drop-downs, we have three text inputs and then a drop-down at the end. I just created a default value for them, demonstrating the row and column. And if you were paying attention, you would have saw that when I clicked on my table, the bottom row actually changed to be the value 40. And that's not something my command does. That's something I specified. And I'll go into that once we start going into the column width. So first of all, ordering. The big important reason why I even created this table in general. You can see that you can select whichever row, and whichever one you currently have selected is the one that these commands will be applied to. So row up, if I click it, this row containing the, let's say, a millimeter and radians with the text input high, and then just the default one. So if we click row up, you'll see it actually moves it up and moves the other row below it while maintaining the selection. So you can see we're still selected on it. So we can hit row up again and move it all the way up, and all the values are the same. Additionally, as you would expect, you can continue clicking row up and nothing's going to happen, no errors will occur, and same for row down. You can hear me furiously clicking. So I feel like that's a really useful tool, and it was really hard to get that to work. The only problem with the workaround I currently have is you have to have at least two columns to be able to do that properly without getting some weird effects. Now, for the column width, this was a really interesting topic, and typically the way Fusion handles column width is you have to provide the table a string that contains essentially just numbers separated by colons for each column. And the numbers correspond to the ratio of size. So because commands are generally based on the size of the box itself, they choose to do this kind of weird layout. And so if you change, if you have a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, that means all the columns are the same size. But if you change the size of one of them, well, that's also going to change the sizes of all of the other columns, because essentially the total ratio, it's not the same. If you did a summation of each of the column sizes, quote unquote, um, you should get this value. So when we had it 1-to-1-to-1-to-1, the value was 4. But if we throw in a 2, well, we're now going to have a 5. So it's essentially changing the overall span of the columns. That now means if Fusion wants to display them, it has to take and compress all of the columns down so that they are visible within the same size command window. So what I did was I took and created a method that allows you to choose which column you want to change. And it's only going to adjust all the values in a way that maintains the summed value. So let's go back to the 1, 1, 1. If you wanted to increase the second row by half, so it would be a 1.5, well, what the command's going to do is it's going to take off a 0.25, or essentially half of the difference. So we're going to have a 0.75 for that first one, and 0.75 for the second one. When referring to like percentages, quote unquote, of the screen, of the command box. Now, obviously, Fusion actually requires these to be integers, so I handle that implicitly in the code, but this is just to give you a general idea. So if you add up all these ratios now, it should still equal 4, and Fusion's not going to try and shift anything. And you can see then that the one column at the end, the one that's not next to the one we wanted to change, is maintaining its original size, so it doesn't change whatsoever. And so we can actually see that really quickly beforehand. To know which column you're editing, I included these 2 asterisks next to it. And you can see that whenever you change or select any command, it will automatically move it to the header of the column that you selected the command input in. So you can also actually select the headers themselves, and that provides a bit nicer way to access which one you want to change, because as you can see with drop downs, to click on them, you can't click on the space in between to change selection. You actually have to click on the command inputs themselves. So I just prefer to do it this way. So in the example I gave, where we had that scaling by 1/2, we have a base size of 40. So let's change our column 1 and let's widen it. So to increase by 50%, we're gonna have to go to 60. So let's do that. Oop, there we go. So you can see that the ending header, as I explained, maintains its original size, and it's just adjusting the size of the columns on either side of the one that you're changing. And that's because essentially widening and narrowing is going from the center outwards. So it's just kind of moving the other ones out of the way. I'm thinking about adding in the option to just have 2 buttons next to the headers that would let you actually adjust a specific header left side or right side. Instead of doing both simultaneously, you can do it independently. And I think that might be a preferable way to approach it, but that's really easy to include. And it's just a matter of a couple lines of code. So on the test cases for the starting and ending columns, you can see that when we adjust it, it's only actually adjusting the size of the column next to it, the one column next to it. And I think looks pretty nice. just because you're selecting this column and you want to widen it, so the logical conclusion is just to shorten the one next to it. There are no wrapping around. I tried to get as many different problems under control for this, and I will continue to update it and fix it to hopefully get it to work a bit better. I don't know why that the sizes are not lining up. I think it just has to do with the commands themselves. It's frustrating. Anyways, um, aside from that, we do have the adding and deleting of rows. Now, Fusion, when you delete a row, it will typically remove the entry and shift everything upwards. And so when you deleted it, your selection would now be the command that was above it, which isn't ideal, um, and would typically lead to the problem of if you were trying to delete a bunch of rows, you eventually it would shift all the way up to the top, and once you finally hit delete on that one, it would move your selection to -1, or essentially no selection, and you would have to click back onto the command box to continue deleting. So I made it so that the deletion actually will reassign the selection to the same index that you just deleted. And then I just needed to handle the end case where if you delete the end entry, it will recognize that and set your selection to the lastmost row that is available. And you can keep going until nothing's left. And then it just tells you to actually select a row that you keep trying to delete. So we can add a bunch more in, shift all these around. Nothing has any problems. And each command object itself, let me refresh it to bring up just that default. So each of these inputs, this text box, this dropdown, they all have their own unique IDs. And that allows you to have a base reference to them without trying to adjust and keep track of them. So the IDs will never change. I'm not changing the values of the row above it. I am literally moving the commands on the table. So you can always reference an object and know that you're going to get it back unless you reassign it or delete it. And aside from that, I think that is everything for the table. And I would love to get some feedback on this. I'm still actively working on it. I actually literally just got it to work about a couple hours ago. So any feedback would be amazing. And I'd really be interested to know how else I could improve upon this table to get it to function in a way that is intuitive and is powerful compared to the older one. And I'm also really interested if maybe there are some other commands that need a bit of a rework or should have an extension like this that basically provides all these extra utilities. So if you have any ideas, please do leave a comment, send me a message. I am going to try and get this onto GitHub, my GitHub, and once I do, I will put the link to it in the description. I probably won't be uploading it until I'm confident that the code is clean and I've gotten everything. So it may be a couple days. But yeah, that's everything. So you all have a great day.